At the end of August 2010, representatives from 5 countries got together to discuss issues concerning independent living. This was the first conference of European Network of Independent Living Nordic Bloc. In general, this bloc includes 8 countries: Norway, Finland, Sweden, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Iceland and Denmark.
This is the first Nordic conference we have for the Nordic Bloc, which is a new way of working for Enil, where we're trying to strengthen the independent living movement throughout Europe by dividing it into the different blocks, north, south, east and west, where the regions can work together. Not that they necessarily have exactly the same standards. As we see, there's a different standard between Iceland and Sweden, if I just take those 2 countries. But there's some sort of a neighbor relationship between us. It's easier, we think, to work this way, to try to have some sort of cooperation and common projects together.
As Jamie told, every country has its own problems, and the problems are very different in entire Enil Nordic bloc. For example, if Latvia doesn't have any kind of personal assistance, Sweden is about to make corrections in laws to make personal assistance service even more accessible. So the differences are pretty large.
Well, we have different countries, of course, with different standards, and if you compare, it's almost impossible to compare, actually. But if you start with Iceland, where there's maybe only 4 or 5 people that have the right to any kind of personal assistance, or not the right, they have no right at all, they have no legislation, but are getting access to some kind of a service. Comparing that to Sweden, where we have many thousands of people with the right, a civil right to personal assistance. What we share in common is that we all believe in independent living, the right to personal assistance, the right of personal assessment to our own needs, so that we can live lives like anybody else.
In spite of what everybody thinks about Norway, we are still in the situation that people are forced into institutions, especially people with intellectual disability, which my 2 daughters have.
Pārējās valstīs vismaz mēģina uzsākt personiskā asistenta pakalpojumu. Latvijā tas pat nav uzsākts. Es teiktu arī, ka iniciatīva lielāka tiek izrādīta. Arī no pašiem cilvēkiem ar invaliditāti citās valstīs.
No, I think there's lots of difference. I mean, obviously, the Western countries have more money than Eastern countries, and often the rights of people with disabilities are very costly. Offering supported housing in the community, or offering assistive technology, making built infrastructure accessible is very expensive. So basically, Western countries are better off from that perspective.
The worst situation with personal assistance is in Iceland and Latvia. But of course, personal assistance is not the only thing that should be improved.
We have many problems, but I think the biggest problem is that disabled people lack knowledge about their rights, and they lack knowledge about their opportunities, their potentials, and while they do, they have difficult times at demanding changes, demanding their rights, demanding that their life will be as the life of disabled people. So what we really need is to educate disabled people so we can empower ourselves.
From the part of persons with disabilities, they need to become more assertive and demand their rights, basically, and stand up for their rights. It's not only, they shouldn't only expect the government to be active, because they will not do. I think the persons with disabilities have to be more active.
So there are problems to be solved in all the Enil Nordic bloc countries. And if the problems have been defined, then we should look for solutions.
We believe that every country should have a legislation making personal assistance a civil right, where the people are to being able to, negotiate their needs with the social worker and getting access to personal assistance for their needs, which if it's 10 hours a day or 24 hours a day, being able to live the life. This means that we need to change attitudes, which today they're using the excuse of the financial crisis in the different countries saying there's no money. It has to be a different priority and a different attitude, saying that this is a human right. It has to come before you start with other, handing out the money for other different things. It's a priority. Take down the war budget or take down other budgets and make sure people get their right to an independent life.
So I think there's always place for better. But obviously I think, there's at this stage in Eastern Europe, there is not sufficient understanding among the public and among policymakers about the needs of persons with disabilities. And if people are not aware about what the needs of the people with disabilities are, then it's very difficult to achieve progress. So that's the first step, and then once people become more sympathetic or empathetic towards the needs of persons with disability, then you can build on that. But there's lots of work to be done on awareness.
As mentioned before, this was the first meeting of Enil Nordic bloc countries. But already there are ideas how to work further and what kind of collaboration is needed for countries to achieve common goals of independent living. It takes time and a lot of work, but it will be done. We'll see.